Hi, this is Pam, founder of Tilt365 again. And in this short video, I'm going to talk about the way that we work with people to help them be more alert and aware and awake about the different kinds of behaviors that we all do every day and which ones will shrink our positive influence and our generativity, and which ones will expand our positive influence and generativity, so that we can do a little bit less of the ones that shrink it and expand the ones that create better interactions with other people. So what you're seeing here is the generative leadership model. I've introduced it in some of the other videos, so you know some of these pieces and parts, but essentially we put forward the idea that people start with a personality pattern, which is represented by one of these four corners: clarity, structure, impact, and connection. But as we mature and develop greater conscious awareness and self-awareness and emotional intelligence, we are able to tilt to any of these four, depending on the situation and the context. And sometimes one is better than the other in that particular situation. So everything is contextual. And the ability to be agile and tilt intentionally is what we teach people how to do. So for example, you see clarity and structure are connected by stability. These are the two tilts that we want to tilt into, or sets of patterns that we want to tilt into if we want to create alignment and stability. If we want to create change, then we want to tilt into connection or impact. If we want to get results, we move to the right. If we want to tune into and include people and different perspectives, we want to tilt to the left. So essentially, this whole person model is what creates generativity. And the thing that we haven't explained yet is the colors, or rings of color, in this particular model. And we have a legend here that you'll see, the 6 mindsets. And you can see that they range from red, protective, competitive, integrative, adaptive, agile, and generative. And we believe that we need all of these. You know, it's not just that you want to be generative all the time. Nobody gets to be that. We do interact in a world where sometimes danger presents, and when it does, we need to be protective or competitive. So we need all of these kinds of behaviors, and they're all inclusive of the other. But what is really helpful is to be aware of when we're moving into different patterns. So you see the colors in the rings, so there is a way to be protective when we're being confident. There's a way to be competitive when we're being confident. There's a way to be integrative when we're being confident. And there's a way to be adaptive when we're being confident. So all of the different character strengths have a range of how they look, depending on what is needed and what's going on at the moment in the context. You also see that certain patterns that people are born with are better at being in certain situations. So people who have the structure tilt are ideal in a situation where there is a crisis or there's danger. Structure people are fantastic at problem solving, and problem solving very cleanly, crisply, and quickly. So everybody's looking toward structure people when the building is on fire, so for example. And they're very good in those high-risk situations. Impact is very good in competitive situations. They can be very opportunistic and visionary and see the future, a bit prescient about what disparate ideas are coming together. So they can be very futuristic in their thinking, and therefore are very good in a competitive situation. Impact tilts are often really good entrepreneurs. They're very comfortable with risk and ambiguity. So in that situation, you want an impact person. Clarity is very good at integrating information and how that information will affect people. So you have the connection of wisdom and people. And they have great judgment and perspective, because they are often studying, researching, and understanding things. and they're very trusted because they care a lot about harmony and respect and mindfulness. So they're very good at alignment and facilitation and mediation and those sorts of things. And then connection is very good at adapting. So they're usually very broadly connected, very likable, very open and approachable, inspiring and empathetic and inclusive. Because of that, they're very well liked. And so in a situation where you need a broad partnership situation, or you're really interacting with a lot of different stakeholders, connection is going to have the emotional intelligence to be able to do that very well and build relationships and partnerships. And as you can see, as I'm talking through this, you probably see yourself in all four, because all four of us are, all of us are whole people who have all four of these sets of patterns. The idea here is that we need to tilt to context in the right situation. So even though I'm not structure, I can go to structure when we're in a problem-solving mode and maybe a crisis. I can also go to clarity when I need to. So anyway, these are all necessary behaviors, but the ones that create more generativity are all of them when they're all being used in the moment, in the right context, and you can shift quickly to get into the right mode. So generativity, as you can see, is purple all the way around, and that lights up when a person is agile, and that's the blue. So they basically have developed all 12 of these character strengths, and they can go to them when they need them. So for example, they're interacting with a person who should have some empathy because of the situation they're in. They can do empathy. They can build trust. They can show you integrity. They're diligent. They're focused, they're bold, they're confident, all of these things. So the greatest leaders are generative leaders. And this model is indicative of their ability to adapt to the right situation at the right time. This is an example of a report where we've had someone collect feedback on the model in our positive influence predictor. And you can see they have different groups of people that they've collected feedback from. In this case, you can see that it's, this person's developed very nice well-roundedness all the way around. So it kind of proves the point that we can. You can definitely see that their natural tilt, a favorite place to be, is clarity because of the strength of the scores here. But they can also go all the way over to structure very strongly, and they can go up to connection very strongly. So lots of great evidence that this person is connection, clarity, and structure when necessary. You can also see the same up in impact, which is their greatest development area. So you can see that they have developed creativity, confidence, and so on. In this case, you can click off and on to see the separate data points, but it's all very interesting to help someone with their self-concept to understand I'm not just a type. I'm actually all of these, and I'm able to be able to go where it's necessary to go. And all of this, when we're collecting feedback on people, is based on the concept called Aristotle's golden mean. So all of the character traits and character strengths of Tilt are positive, timelessly positive attributes like assertive, for example. But what we are looking at is how much do we overuse or underuse the positive attribute of assertive. And it's okay to underuse or overuse as long as you're not doing it too often or to such an extreme that you're triggering behaviors in others. So in this case, too little would be acting passive. And so this would be seen as a deficiency of assertive, and being passive too much of the time is going to eventually invite other people to take advantage of you. So that's not good. But being passive in the right situation, like just going along to be a team player on something that doesn't matter that much, or that isn't the most important thing to you, might be the right thing to do. Just be still and be quiet and be okay about it. So, but doing it too often or too extreme is not a good idea. And the same would be true if you overused assertive and you were aggressive too much of the time, or you were so aggressive that it became hostile. So doing it too often or too much would be considered an excess and would trigger negative interactions with other people. So the ideal is you want to be in the middle, and be as balanced as possible and have a low frequency. Now, we do think that going to extremes is something that can be useful in the right measure at the right moment, but not doing it so much that we become an annoyance or triggering counterproductive behavior in other people. So when we collect scores from on observations from other people on us, the score scale is representing Aristotle's golden mean. So you see assertive here in the middle would be agile, and moving out to the right, you can see the cursor here. If it goes out this far to the right, then you would end up being kind of in the yellow zone, which is more integrative, but not so far that it's competitive or protective or rigid. Same thing happens on the other side, and too little assertive. So we're looking at, is there, the observations, are we doing it too little or too much? And then it ends up on the graph. And the more we are to center here, the more positive our scores are on that other graph. Another way of looking at it here, we have this kind of the psychology behind it in this particular visual that kind of helps us understand the different ways that we might show up in each of the 4 quadrants in these levels. So for example, in the wisdom quadrant, if we're being protective, the thing that you'll notice most if your wisdom is a strong quadrant for you, you'll show up kind of like a critic. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, we have people that we pay to be critics. It's not a bad thing unless it's overused or it's too extreme. The same thing with the orange zone. Now, the way that a person who prefers this wisdom quadrant shows up as competitive is they're self-conserving. So they kind of withdraw from others. So they kind of freeze and withdraw. And the competitiveness is to kind of withhold from you. So it is, taking away from another person. So it's self-conserving. That's the way that it shows up for them. And then the way that they influence others is interpersonal avoidance. But when they become more adaptive, they become more focused on achievement and become kind of the sage of truth in the more advanced levels of generativity. Each one of them has a fear and a need, a human need that's associated with that quadrant. So this gets kind of deep, but it's really interesting to coaches and leaders who want to understand, why is this person behaving this way? For example, you might wonder sometimes, why is this person kind of acting like a bully and being kind of a saboteur? Well, it's usually, if you go look at the fear, the fear is vulnerability when that's going on, and the way it shows up is a need for power and autonomy. And we all have these needs. We all have a need for status and significance. We all have a need for power and autonomy. We all have a need for freedom and novelty. And we all have a need for acceptance and belonging. And underneath those, we all have fears that have been developed inside of us when we don't get those needs met. And so when we teach both our users and leaders and coaches how to take this apart and kind of understand it, this is kind of a downloadable cheat sheet that you can take to kind of understand your own behavior and understand the behavior of others, and tap into the underbelly or the fragile aspect that might be under there that you could help them with, and kind of reach in and have a conversation and a dialogue about, and say, what are you really afraid of, instead of being triggered by them and now kind of really being pushing them away. So in organizations, you don't want to see people being protective or competitive so much of the time that, or any of these actually, so much of the time that it becomes a negative. But they're all necessary to us, being able to survive an unfriendly environment very often. And just one more comment on this is that in the levels is that all of the model is expressed in what we call polarities or dualities. So you can't be like in this case the polarity of trust and confidence. Those two go with each other. If you become over trusting, then it's going to pull down your confidence score. So you can see the relationship across the model for too much trust, and you're gonna come across as not very confident. Too much confidence, and you're gonna come across as not someone to trust. So both sides of these polarities need to be balanced in order to show up at our best as well. So just leave you with one thought, that even our top traits and strengths can be liabilities if we overuse them too often or to too much extreme. Thank you for listening.